So we figured out why Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman have died. We have figured out why Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman had died. Betsy Arakawa had died on February 11th, and they're able to find that out because she didn't use her email anymore, and she also didn't use her clicker, which she used to get into the private community where her and Gene had lived. They lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, on Old Sunset Trail. Betsy Arakawa was seen in surveillance going to the vet, CVS, and the farmer's market the last time she was seen on February 11th, but then 5:15 p.m., that's the last electronic data of her movements. 5:15 p.m., that was the last time she used her clicker to access the private community where her and Gene Hackman had lived. And so with that data available, they are saying that Betsy Arakawa had died February 11th, and she had died of Hantavirus. Hantavirus, pulmonary syndrome. And they're both saying, the medical examiner, they said that both of them had died of natural causes. Now, it's interesting that Betsy Arakawa had died on February 11th, and then Gene Hackman is going to die 7 days later on February 18th. And the reason why they know that is because that was the last that they had seen the pacemaker. The pacemaker, it wasn't working past February 18th. And so they're concluding the pacemaker had failed. Since the pacemaker had failed, therefore he already had extensive heart disease. And so the primary cause of death for Gene Hackman is extensive heart disease. Betsy Arakawa died of Hantavirus, and Gene Hackman had died of extensive heart disease. And the contributing factor was advanced Alzheimer's disease. So he had some sort of mental dementia. And that's a good excuse. It seems like that's, plausible, most likely. Because it seems very odd that Gene Hackman died 7 days after Betsy Arakawa had died. But if he's got this Alzheimer's disease, and so if we go along with the official narrative, it's possible he didn't even know that she had died. He's just wandering around. He's just wandering around, not knowing what's going on. Might not even known that she had died. He did not starve to death, however. He didn't dehydrate. Hold on. He didn't dehydrate. He didn't have any food in his stomach. So he was able to get water. That's what that means. He didn't dehydrate, but he didn't have food in his stomach. So he knew how to get himself something to drink, but maybe he couldn't feed himself. It takes about 1 to 2 months to starve to death, and that's, without water, it's a little bit less, but the big thing is dehydration can kill within 5 to 7 days. There's no evidence that Gene Hackman had tried to communicate with anybody after February 11th. So that's the official narrative. He couldn't take care of himself, and Betsy Arakawa had died, February 11th, and then he's just wandering around confused, able to get himself something to drink, but not able to make a phone call, not able to lift her up off the floor. So it would be interesting to know how advanced his Alzheimer's disease was, because I guess I want to blame somebody, right? It's like if somebody dies unnecessarily, you want to blame somebody. And there is some blame to go around. I want to make sure I get all the facts first. So let's get the facts first. So Hantavirus, it's extremely rare. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is extremely rare, and it comes from only specific rats and mice. Hantavirus comes from white-footed mice and deer mice. House mice don't get Hantavirus, but white-footed mice, deer mice, they can get Hantavirus. They can get the Hantavirus. And the Hantavirus is found in about 12% of deer mice and white-footed mice. You could also rats, rice and cotton rats. So Hantavirus exists in rice and cotton rats and white-footed and deer mice. So Hantavirus is an extremely rare disease. They said there was like 100 people or so had died of it in New Mexico, like in the past, I don't know, so many years or so. And where the Hantavirus comes from, so if these white-footed and deer mice and or rice and cotton rats have the Hantavirus, you could get it through their feces, you could get it through their urine, or you could get it through their saliva. So with the deer mice or the rice and cotton rats and the white-footed mice, you get it through their saliva or their droppings or their urine. And if you could get it through saliva, you probably could get it through their blood too. And they said that it was a zoonotic ailment, which means that it could go from animal to human. Dogs cannot get Hantavirus. Dogs cannot get Hantavirus. So unless you're eating the mice or somehow you came across mice blood or rat blood, and again, it's rice and cotton rats and white-footed and deer mice. So it's not all rodents, but it's also not all mice and rats. And I haven't heard of any other rodents except for those, those two species of mice and rats that have it. So it could come from, a white-footed mouse could bite you, the saliva could get to you, the urine, and the way that they say typically how people get Hantavirus is when you're cleaning an area where there's a lot of deer mice droppings or rice and cotton rat droppings, white-footed mice, and then it becomes airborne. So the urine or the saliva or the shit or the piss or the spit becomes airborne. So when it becomes airborne, that's when somebody breathes it in. And so you can't, if a person has it, a person can't give it to another person. Dogs can't get Hantavirus. Only mouse to that person can get it. So you can only get it from the mouse droppings, their urine, or the saliva. And probably blood too, I would presume. But maybe, I don't know. The way that the Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome works is it starts with like flu-like symptoms. So you feel like you got the flu, right? You feel sick, you feel down, you feel like your body's in overdrive. You just want to kind of sleep and lethargic, but then it gets worse. It gets worse, and it leads to major lung and heart problems, life-threatening lung and heart problems. So the Hantavirus, she's going to get the Hantavirus, right? And then people are saying that the house was a mess and that the house wasn't a mess. And then you could get it outside somehow. And so that would matter because since I'm sad, Gene Hackman, I don't know Gene Hackman, but he was an everyman. I saw Unforgiven. I saw the Royal Tenenbaums. And he was good in both of those movies. Since he's a celebrity, by focusing on Gene Hackman, then we can use the example of Gene Hackman on how to sort of gauge other people who died. If you didn't need to die, that pisses me off. Everybody dies, and death comes to us all. So I'm sad about it, but I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off because he shouldn't have died and she shouldn't have died. Betsy Arakawa had died from, we'll just say a cotton rat. So maybe a cotton rat had pooped. She got, around some cotton rat poop, and they even said she wore a mask. So somehow she got around some cotton rat poop, caught the Hantavirus. She's 60-something years old. He's 30 years her elder. And since she was the primary caregiver, once she had died, then he had died. If Gene Hackman is rich, you would assume he's got enough money to take care of himself. You would assume he's got enough money for a maid. You would assume he's got money for intensive care. And then if he's 95 years old, if he is that out of it, if he is just in Alzheimer's, it was like 1 year ago, they had taken a picture of him like walking to the store, carrying some little grocery bag. So just 1 year ago, he at least was conscious enough to walk into the store, grab some items, put it in a bag, pay for it, and walk out. So it does seem crazy to me that he didn't call anybody. But that Alzheimer's disease does explain that, right? He's got dementia. He doesn't understand what's going on. But if he is that far out of it, where are the children at? Where are the children at? How come he didn't have a maid? How come he didn't have a caretaker? They said that there was some caretaker for the community. So it was more like a lawn guy, right? Some sort of lawn guy, some sort of landscaping guy. Wasn't it the caretaker they said that had found them? Let's keep on going. Let's make sure we get all the facts. So February 26th is when they found the 3 dead bodies. February 18th is when they're saying that the pacemaker had stopped. And then February 11th is when they said that Betsy Arakawa, that's when she had died. So Betsy Arakawa succumbs to the Hantavirus, lung and heart problems. Gene Hackman is going to die from extensive heart disease. Now, she said she didn't know if he had a heart attack or not. But that would have to be it, right? If you just have extensive heart disease, does your heart just give up? Does your heart just give out? Because I would think that death would come when your heart stops, your brain stops, your lungs, all that contributes to the rest of it. But I would think your consciousness would be your brain, right? Your heart is pumping blood. So if your heart is just gone, to put someone's heart back into their chest, you'd have to do it, quickly. A lung, you could have a punctured lung, but you'd have to get on that pretty quick too. Because if you're just breathing, then, there could be fluid that's coming in. And then if you're breathing, it's just going, are you even able to, contract the muscles? So I would rank them, brain and heart are the most important. And then the lung would be pretty important too. So he's going to die February 18th with an extensive heart disease. She died February 11th. And then 3 dead bodies were found February 26th. Gene Hackman has 3 kids. Gene Hackman has 3 kids. He's got Chris, Elizabeth, and Leslie. Chris is 65 years of age. Elizabeth is 63, and Leslie is 58. Now, I've never heard of any troubles or not troubles, so I'm not going to presume that, Gene was good or bad or anything like that. They're very old. So to think that somebody in their 50s or 60s, hey, I'm trying to talk about Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. Can I do that? Is that all right with you? You better not be barking at that puppy. Aphrodite, you okay? So when you have the Hantavirus starts out like flu-like symptoms, and then it goes to lung and heart problems, major life-threatening lung and heart problems, and then that can lead to shock. It can also lead to organ failure and death. It causes basically severe breathing difficulties. And then the fatality rate of Hantavirus is incredible. If a person gets Hantavirus, there's no cure. There's no cure for the flu or pneumonia, right? You just have to take care of the person and let the body sort of regenerate. It's like 38 to 50%. So if you get Hantavirus, there's almost, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2 chance you're going to die from it. So make sure you clean out, any of the white-footed and deer mice and rice and cotton rat droppings or urine or saliva that you come across. Make sure you're masked up, and then make sure you disinfect that area. Now, only 12% of the deer mice, in general have Hantavirus, so it's not like they all have Hantavirus. Most of them do not. I had heard that it was reported that the house was messy, so that does just seem crazy that you got 2 elderly people, 95-year-old, 63 or something-year-old Betsy Arakawa, and that seems likely to me. Occam's razor, right? So if you got a messy house, she's elderly, she has to take care of another elderly man. Where are the kids at? Where are these 50 or 60 or 65 years old? So, they can almost get Social Security, right? The average lifespan is 76, so they're in the winter of their lives. And to think that they didn't, and then I'm sure they got kids of their own, so there's grandkids too. So it seems crazy to me that these kids hadn't talked to their father or the mother. I mean, I don't know anything about Betsy Arakawa. They hadn't talked to him for like months. If they knew that he was just basically had this terrible Alzheimer's disease, then they would know that he needs intensive care. He would need a caregiver like 24/7. And at the very least, have a maid just so that they can kind of help out with household stuff. They're two elderly people, and they got a nice little, they call it a compound, so they got a nice house. Now, all these facts put to bed to rest a lot of, any speculation. There is no foul play. People are suggesting it had something to do with Epstein. I saw this one YouTube channel that just always lies about celebrity deaths. There's no tunnel that was underneath his house. It's not murder. So we got an explanation. We got a pretty good explanation, and pretty much we know all the information that needs to be known. Betsy Arakawa died of Hantavirus. Gene Hackman had died of extensive heart disease. Now, the one big unknown is Zinnia. So when it comes to Zinnia, there's a necropsy. There's a necropsy for Zinnia, which was the dog. So you had the Australian Kelpie. The Australian Kelpie that had died being stuck into its crate. Betsy, I stand corrected. I had a theory that, something else had happened, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Betsy Arakawa loved that dog. She had actually took it to the vet just 2 days prior to her dying. And that's probably why it was in the cage, right? It was taken to the vet, and they needed to just kind of keep it, still, keep it away from the other dogs so that it's not biting or struggling with the other things. Zinnia, which is a nickname for Zinfandel, the Australian Kelpie, the reddish Australian Kelpie. She had actually, or he, I don't know if it's he or she, but Zinnia had actually participated in the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. So it's like a super dog. This Zinnia is like a super dog. So we know what happened to Betsy Arakawa. We know what happened to Gene Hackman. We don't know what happened to Zinnia, the dog. There's still a necropsy that they're going to do later on. But Betsy Arakawa did love that dog. 2 days before she had died, she took it to the vet to get surgery. So he had died of some sort of hypertension, something about hypertension, extensive heart disease, with a contributing factor being advanced Alzheimer's disease. So he had some sort of heart disease, and then his Alzheimer's disease had contributed to it. He also hadn't eaten for many days. They found no food in his stomach, but he was hydrated. So him being hydrated meant that he was actually conscious enough to get some water, because that seems like an excuse to me. I was thinking it was kind of the opposite. I thought that he had died and then she had been distraught. There's pill bottles all over the place. But it's actually the opposite. Betsy Arakawa died first, and then Gene Hackman is walking around for 7 days. It is also possible that the pacemaker could ping. They didn't have an explanation for if the pacemaker could actually send the information out. So they said that they could find the data for February 17th, the pacemaker company or people who investigated this. So that's how we know that he had died on February 18th. So they could see the data, they could see the data. But they said also in order to get some more information, they would have to interrogate the pacemaker itself. So the information, they could get information, which, what about all those electronic waves? If they're able to get the information from the pacemaker from afar, does that mean there's all these electronic waves that are coming out? And then there's, like a little black box that's inside the thing. They could actually look at the pacemaker and they could get information from the pacemaker itself. So if we want to blame somebody, maybe we could blame the pacemaker company, right? If the pacemaker had stopped, how come that didn't ping to the doctor, to the hospital? And then how come it didn't go, they didn't, follow up with that ping? If the pacemakers stop and they're able to see the data and they're able to interrogate it and there's information that's on it, but they don't know that it stopped, maybe it was just a pacemaker had failed. I suppose the heart could fail and then the pacemaker could fail as well. When they asked if it was a heart attack, she said she didn't know. So the main lady who did the autopsy said that she couldn't know. She wasn't able to determine if it was a heart attack itself. So I guess there's 2 or 3 people that we can blame. I think the kids. Chris is 65, Elizabeth is 63, and Leslie is 58 years old. And then there's the pacemaker company. And then maybe, Gene himself or something. I don't know how reclusive and private they were. But why didn't they get themselves a maid? Why didn't they have themselves an intensive care taker or caregiver? And what's the difference between a caregiver or a caretaker? I know one who gives. I'd rather have a caregiver, somebody who gives me care and doesn't take care away. So it's just, in my mind, both caregivers and caretakers are the same thing. But they said it was the caretaker or it was the lawn guy that had found the bodies to begin with. But if we can blame somebody, because people who shouldn't die, people who died when they shouldn't have died, then something could have been prevented, something could have happened. Somebody was negligent. There's a reason they didn't have a maid. You got all these, cotton rat droppings. I don't know what exactly breed of rat or mice that it was around, but there's cotton rat poop or urine or saliva. So there's all this cotton rat droppings all over the place. They don't have a maid. They're not being cleaned up. If there was a caretaker there just to not only make sure they get their medicine, but I believe that a caregiver, I like caregiver better, a caregiver would make sure they get their medicine, but it would also make sure that the house is clean too. So I would look to the pacemaker company. How come the pacemaker didn't ping the right doctor? And then the kids.